y'all. I'm really sorry I'm a day late in dropping this episode. I've actually been sick. My husband and I went on vacation, caught something, came back, and now I have a sick kid. And so it's really been an off week for all of us, and it's like only Tuesday. So I appreciate you all bearing with me right now with this delay. I've been trying to be on top of it and dropping the podcast every Monday night so it's available for Tuesdays. And I just really needed to focus on resting. And so I appreciate you guys, like I said, bearing with me, and still listening to this podcast, as I'm kind of learning and getting my reins in terms of what you all are finding valuable in terms of content and how I can help kind of bridge that gap with my expertise, and knowledge within the industry as well. And also, fun fact, I'm currently wearing a hoodie in Texas. That's where I live, because it's like 60 something degrees now. I'm recording this after hours after my baby went to bed. So I got a little chilly in my house, and I'm currently repping a black Boston hoodie. Um, Another fun fact is I've always had a fascination with Boston, and I've never actually been. So one day my husband will take me. But yeah, I'm repping my favorite black Boston hoodie today for good vibes. So again, I appreciate you all bearing with me as we navigate kind of this point of exhaustion in entrepreneurship, at least on my end. Um, for today's episode, I wanted to break down how I specifically approach modeling a demand gen go-to-market plan for my clients. I met a really nice woman earlier this week who literally randomly like cold messaged me on a Slack community channel asking for help for a demand gen role that she's applying for. And first of all, I was absolutely flattered and, tried to help her as best as I could. And then I thought, this isn't the first time that the question has been asked to me, when you're thinking about a demand gen plan, where should you start? And so I thought it could be a really neat podcast episode to not only help others who are looking to get started with a demand gen plan, but then also to kind of shine some more light on my own expertise so that y'all can get a better understanding of, just how my own brain works. And so for any new clients that sign on with Elevate Growth, which is my demand gen consulting business, I deploy what I call an understand, formulate, and conquer the market model, which essentially it's broken down by each of those sections. And this is just one package of the services that I offer. So for the Understand What Matters package, essentially what we're looking to do is to determine the important business metrics that matter. So we're looking at what that marketing ad spend is, what that budget is, the tech stack that is currently available, any type of resources, the stakeholders are going to be important in terms of keeping informed. We're going to be looking to identify what measures success. Like at the end of the day, when we think about this partnership between you and me, what is it that you're going to hold me accountable for? What are some of the KPIs that we could work towards together? So that at the end of the journey, or as we continue to partner together, we continue to pace and check in on those agreed upon KPIs. Then I like to discover like what those key pain points are for the existing campaign strategy. What's not working? What are you trying to do? Why are you looking for my help? And this goes as granular as like a campaign channel strategy. So what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked, why has it worked and or not worked? And then, of course, I love to understand the positioning of the company and the messaging and get a better understanding on how that company wants to be perceived in the market. What are they trying to achieve? Who are their top competitors, some of their best competitors, and why? Why does all that matters? And so normally what I do is I approach that with at least 3 1-hour interviews with the head of marketing, the head of sales, and at least one customer of the company's choosing. And that normally gets me a good understanding on what everybody can define as success, the opinions of how everything is going to be modeled, the perception for that market positioning, and so on. So that's the Understand What Matters section. And then after we understand all of those important components, the next step is to formulate a plan. And so basically what I do at that point is I take the findings from the understand what matters audit or assessment or whatever you want to call that, and then I create a feasible campaign plan or go-to-market plan that highlights the channels with the specific investment per channels. And so normally that takes about like 3 feedback sprints with the initial my draft, share those thoughts, couple questions back and forth to where we can finally get a game plan that all of us, marketing, sales, whatever other stakeholders need to be involved in order to get signed off and to start executing. And then my favorite part of this package is conquer the market. And so essentially, this is the implementation of the approved campaign plan. So once we understand what we're trying to achieve, once we have a plan to bridge that gap, now we're in conquer the market mode. Now we're actually implementing those specific channel strategies. And we go from pretty much having like nothing in market, because I work with a lot of startups who are either just getting started with marketing or they really haven't seen any traction with marketing. And so this is where the fun begins, where you're starting to get that trust built to start executing and start seeing kind of those short-term wins. And then the longevity of this package is essentially like I'm your long-term demand gen gal, where I then continue on as like an optimization specialist as well, where I continue monitoring the performance, providing the recommendations, any type of enhancements or pivots or any other strategy conversations that are needed. And kind of that resource throughout to make sure that everything from a marketing standpoint and demand gen standpoint is kind of running fluidly as well. Um, and so from there, what is really nice, actually, I'm going to back up a little bit into the kind of that formulated plan section because I think there's a little bit more meat there. After I understand a little bit more from that understanding what matters section, and part of formulating that plan is to get a better understanding of everything that I've heard. How does that match with the data? And so what I like to do is deep dive inside of their market automation platform and or their sales CRM. And so usually that's like a HubSpot or a Marketo or a Salesforce. And then I begin personally pulling reports as best as I can, or, looking at some of the data as best as I can to look at if what they told me aligns with what I'm seeing with the data. And if yes, cool, that makes transitioning to the next step of that formulating a plan a lot easier because there's really no delay in those type of conversations and alignments. If there's not, then I then model out kind of the discrepancies between what I heard, what we talked about, and with what the data is saying, and kind of trying to find a way to remedy those type of conversations and or discrepancies. And then we set in place a little bit more realistic targets, and then we continue the conversation for the buy-in. And then that's when, you put together that plan, that formulate a plan, and then going on to conquering the market. Essentially what this allows us to do is to have that foundation and that go-to-market plan. And one of the things that I really pride myself the most when it comes for kind of what I want to be known for Elevate Growth, is my ability to generate custom go-to-market strategies for my clients. And so there are some agencies, some that I've even worked with, like while I was in-house, specific paid media agencies, specific demand gen agencies, where they solicit like a proven playbook or a proven methodology. And while all that sounds great, and sure, some of those things could totally translate, I don't think everything always does or always should or always will. And especially when we talk about startups, in my opinion, so many things like change so drastically, so quickly. And everybody is trying to, be a category leader. Everybody is trying to 10x their revenue. And so one strategy that you do for one startup isn't going to work for another startup simply because the foundation of each of those is going to be so different, at least from what I've discovered. And so I like to pride myself that each one of my clients gets a custom strategy that models their specific business needs. And that goes off of that understand what matters portion, really deep diving into what are you trying to achieve in terms of your business goals, and then putting together that plan of action to actually help you achieve those goals. And so I really like to allow my clients to have a fresh start and fresh eyes with a plan that could potentially, work best for them as opposed to like a proven methodology or something. So after we get a better understanding on what the goals are and what their marketing budget is, this is where I start breaking down more of like the channel strategies. And I'm gonna back up again a little bit more because my brain always goes like 100 million miles an hour, and then my mouth never catches up, and I end up like just talking random words. And I'm known to not actually speak English, to be honest. Like I speak Janelle, is what my husband says. I'm also bilingual, so my brain thinks in like both English and Spanish, and I'm trying to like figure out what I'm trying to say and then like actually say it correctly. And so again, bear with me, partially sick, partially having an off week, and then partially I just suck at public speaking to begin with. So I'm gonna break this down a little bit further for you all. So I actually use a spreadsheet for modeling revenue targets, because there's no surprise, right, that demand gen is held accountable to actual revenue targets and not just specifically like leads, like a traditional lead gen model. And so what I like to do when I do that, understand what matters assessment, so then break this down again, going into the data. So I pull what the prior year closed won revenue was. I pull what the current year is, or 2022 is, and then I pull whatever that like growth rate that they're wanting to achieve. So normally I see anywhere between about a 40% growth rate all the way to about a 75% growth rate, depending on, how quickly they want to scale, how long they've been in business, and kind of like what's achievable. And then from there, you model the traditional like sales cycle, the average sales cycle, to kind of figure out how long it'll take you to actually close these type of accounts. And then of course, churn is important, and ACV, or the average contract value, is important. And then you just backtrack the math. And you just figure out, based on what that revenue target is, how many of the accounts are actually going to churn, and how much that ACV is, how many accounts do you actually need in order to hit that revenue target. And so basically I model that in terms of the 2021, 2022, 2023 strategy, or whatever year becomes relevant. And then we talk about how many in the prior year were closed won, how many accounts actually churned. And then we talk about what that total like target net new account number looks like. And then we break that down into the revenue goals. And what I do is take it a step further and talk about what their marketing budget looks like. And so normally I see a less than about a 20% marketing budget based on the revenue targets. I see anywhere between about like 10 to 12. And normally about a 20% compared to the revenue target is what's needed to kind of really see that growth and to enable marketing to do that type of awareness building. And so I propose to them a recommended marketing budget, and again, have that conversation if it's significantly larger or a little bit more like shocking than what they're used to. And then we model down how many opportunities that's going to need, how many opportunities they have like to date, and then what that win rate looks like. And I model that again for, 2021, 2022, 2023. So we can start looking at win rate over time. We can start looking at if we're closing any more opportunities than we were the year faster, if ACVs are getting any higher. And so those are some of the data points that we can start talking about and analyzing as, our partnership continues to develop. Those are some of the things that I like to look at personally. And a lot of the clients that I've signed hasn't been at like the beginning or the very end of a year yet. It's kind of just been in between. And so a lot of what they're looking to do is to fill the pipe for 2023. We're already in towards the end of the year, right? And so everything we're doing right now is going to start impacting 2023. And so I always put together a picture of like, hey, your revenue goal for 2022 is this. Here's how you're pacing towards that. And if it's realistic that you're going to hit that target or not, and or recommendations for how to ramp up to get a little bit better results there. And so then with that marketing budget recommendation, that's when we start putting together what percent of revenue marketing is responsible for. So traditionally, it's been about a 30% um, responsibility to revenue. And that can go anywhere to as low as like 30% all the way up to 50% or more, depending on where you are in your demand gen journey. I actually did a podcast episode talking about, how to measure, when to measure demand gen. So if you want a little bit more color on that, make sure you check out that episode. But traditionally, I model about a 30% revenue target as we're just starting out. And a lot of my customers have been pivoting from, a lot of my clients have been pivoting from a lead gen model to a demand gen. So definitely want to start out small with some breadcrumbs and start getting some of that momentum going. And so from there, now that we have that agreed upon like marketing budget, revenue goals, revenue targets, I then model another spreadsheet to where I break down the specific channels of what I want to achieve, where I want to spend, and how much I want to spend. So you'll see things like paid social, paid search, some like paid videos, definitely like paid media, right? You have Facebook and stuff in there. Some of the lower funnel channels, which you'll see like Trust Radius or software advice, and making sure that some of those review strategies are there as well, because that's definitely still important in a 2022 modern buyer. You'll see things like partnerships and events, and making sure that if an in-person networking event is essential for this type of business model and or industry, then that's essential to a marketing strategy as well. I know there's a lot of like confusion and conversation in terms of like, is event marketing like still worth it? Is that a waste of money? And transparently, I think it just all depends. I think it depends on the event. I think it depends on how much you're spending on the event, what you hope to get out of the event, and how that event works and or translates to the industry that you're in. I don't think, again, everything is one-to-one. And then I also roll in if there's any type of like vendor charges or anything that we need to consider from an overarching like marketing strategy plan. So this budget takes into consideration everything of marketing, tech stack, all that great stuff, and not necessarily just a demand gen portion. Once that's kind of reviewed upon, has the eyes, then I break down what is the demand gen specific portion. And I build out those specific channel strategies. So if we're talking about we want to spend, I don't know, like 60K on LinkedIn for paid social, what does that look like? What is that strategy? Do we need to spend 60K? Why or why not? So then breaking that down into that specific channel strategy of what that messaging, what that audience, what that, the meat and potatoes of advertising on LinkedIn and what that actually going to look like. And then putting together those recommendations for some of the ad messaging, the campaign targeting, the audience, blah, blah, blah. And so that's, I think, pretty much the bulk of kind of how I get started with thinking about it, the process that I do with my clients in terms of like what to expect when working for me. And whenever I do my initial like discovery calls with them and the follow-up like proposals and whatnot, I do walk through that like I call it conquer the market package, where you walk through that, understand what matters, formulate a plan, and conquer the market. Kind of like workbook, if you will, to where I work through those items with the clients to put together that plan of action and that game plan. One of the things that I think is really important, not only as you're modeling an initial plan, but also if you're trying to pivot from a lead gen to a demand gen plan, is to look at the conversion rates. I didn't include this when I was talking about my budget breakdowns, but essentially, so I actually end up doing the math all the way from like, if there's any type of leads that we can expect, all the way through to opportunities and like a closed 1%. And so I'm caveating this with leads being like high intent demo requests. We're not doing a lead gen strategy. And so I go into if they have it like in HubSpot or Marketo, and I try to pull what those life cycle conversion rates are. So this is a little more of like the traditional lead gen model, where you work backwards based on those conversion rates, and you try to set a plan in place and say we need X amount of leads to get X amount of MQLs, to get X amount of XQLs, blah, blah, blah. I do this analysis and I put together these numbers for a conversation only. This is not saying, paid search is going to yield X amount of leads. Like that is not the expectation that I put together with these type of things. It's more of, hey, in my experience, when we spend this amount of money on, Google or LinkedIn, we can start seeing the ROI of website visits based on this type of spend of X amount. And so it's more of like an assumption, and or benchmark and KPIs just to work towards, to monitor, to have something as a plan of action to look at, more than just like this specific channel is going to drive X. And what I do is I map all that out per all the different channels that I'm recommending and everything that we're trying to do from a go-to-market perspective. And I use that with their existing life cycle conversion rates. And traditionally, with a lead gen model, those type of conversion rates are more on the lower side. They're not as high converting from like a lead to an opportunity perspective, because the quality isn't there. They're going after the quantity, right? And so that conversion rate is a lot lower. And then I clone this marketing strategy, and I put my own like target conversion rates. And then we start looking at what, if we did absolutely nothing but ramped up what you're currently doing and did not improve your life cycle rates, here's what we can expect from a revenue perspective. If, you continue trusting me and this continues to work and we start working towards this like newer demand gen model, and we're successful in increasing these conversion rates to these specific percents, this is what that revenue target will look like, right? And so you can really start seeing from a numerical standpoint, because executives, CFOs, they're all about numbers. They're all about like having it in front of it, being able to see and comprehend. And so putting together these plan of actions with numbers and that are backed behind it kind of opens their eyes in terms of like, whoa, like the problem isn't necessarily investing in marketing. It's finding ways to be more efficient with marketing. And, case in point for the specific life cycle stages, like we're so focused on worrying about other items to generate net new that we're not worrying about how we're converting the existing ones that we're currently having. When like personally, if we have good data, that could be low-hanging fruit, right? And so it really just, again, depends on the situation, depends on the scenarios. But that's another one of the great conversations that I like to have in terms of like conversion rates. They matter, they're important, and they can be essential for making or breaking a marketing plan. And especially as we're looking to transition from a lead gen model to a demand gen model, right? Like, what are some of the benchmarks that we need to be striving for that measure success, not only from a conversion standpoint, because that indicates quality, but then also from a revenue standpoint. The higher conversion rates, the more at-bats and or opportunities that will close. And so that automatically impacts and increases revenue as well, which is music to everybody's ears and kind of, a win-win. So I hope that helps. That's kind of everything that I think I work through with my clients. If you're interested in these type of spreadsheets, feel free to let me know. Hit me up on LinkedIn, send me an email. I'm at Janelle at elevate-growth.com. I'd be happy to anonymize some of it, and just give you like a standard template if you're interested, if it would help. So let me know. I hope this was helpful. As always, let me know your feedback. Thank you so much for listening. And if you found it valuable, I would really appreciate if you shared it with a friend and or colleague. Thanks.